A? Is it like
No,
the very
my
beginning?
enrichment teacher doesn't let us go to the bathroom.
Even
So-
during enrichment?
No, we're not allowed
Who do you
to.
have?
Miss Aldrich.
I'm gonna email her, see if you can come in. Do you have her, but you don't have, do you have her for or A enrichment?
I
At
have,
the very beginning when you come
no,
in?
I have like E, like
We have
lunch,
E
so
lunch.
we have like
Gotcha.
the last of everything. She won't let us get on our phones or
She
go to the
said we have 3
bathroom.
minutes to go to the bathroom.
Yeah,
The whole class period.
we're in there.
Okay.
Miss
So, don't forget though, I do have Monday, Wednesday afternoons, you can come to tutoring, it's free tutoring. Tuesday, Friday morning, 7:20, 7:55, I'm here to tutor students. So, if you do need help, come in, but there's also why like come in during, or come in ready to ask questions during class. I'll give you feedback on this so that you can improve your understanding before the test. Okay, so I'll do that. Alright, so quickly, trying to analyze structure of inequality in one variable to help determine if the solution is greater or less than the solution to the related equation. I'm going to do something a little bit differently today in the sense that I'm going to go over some direct instruction first with y'all so that we can get through the inequalities and get on to absolute value stuff today. But we'll talk about that very heavily to start, get ready to talk about that. We're going to write and solve inequalities to answer questions about a situation. That's what we've done for the last day, right? Writing and solving inequalities to answer questions. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but in the real world, what's more prevalent, equations or inequalities? In the real world, what's going to be more prevalent to represent situations, equations or inequalities? Inequalities, right? Remember that budget situation we had, the last one that we did with equations? Do you really have to use all of your budget? No, you could use all of it or you could spend less than it, right? Inequalities are much more useful in the real world. When we talk about this gasoline in the tank, right? The inequality is much more representative of what could happen. If you are expecting people to show up to a party, let's say it's 30, is it very realistic that exactly 30 people will show up? No. It's probably at least 30 people, or at most 30 people. Inequalities are very useful for the real world. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. But then also don't forget, when we look at this, what I want to talk about, can you ever get negatives with the number of hours that he can mow? So remember how we had to go from 0 to whatever it was, 12 and a half hours, I think? So we have to keep in mind the context. And finally, how are we going to represent our solutions to inequalities? Say again? Okay, so the maximum, so do we go max and then min?
No, min.
So we do a minimum and then we do a maximum. Is that it? Need something else with this.
Even like a bracket.
The little thing.
You can either use a bracket or you can use a, but what is this called? Right, we can use interval notation to represent this, and the whole point of interval notation is we're saying, hey, this is the lowest value possible, and then we have everything up to this highest value possible, right? Don't forget the bracket means that you can equal or include that value. The parenthesis means that you do not equal or do not include that value. Everything up to it, but not that value itself. And then the number line. Yes. Personally, or not personally, I would make this note to yourself. I'm going to ask you to do both interval notation and number lines on the test. You need to be prepared to do that. Okay? On the test, I will expect you to do number lines and interval notation. All right, so this is where I'm going to do differently, or do things a little bit differently. I'm going to turn the lights off so you can see it more clearly, but we're going to go over this together. So, I'll go ahead and tell you, you can use either of these strategies. Andre's is the one I like. Hopefully you remember with inequalities, sometimes you have to reverse the direction of the inequality. Do you remember doing that some? I'm guessing by the blank faces, no?
What was the question?
At some points with inequalities, you have to reverse the direction of the inequality. You don't remember doing that? Ooh.
It sounds like you're making it more complicated than it needs to be. Look, why would you just swap it randomly? You get the same answer.
It's not randomly. Okay, so let's look at this one. Okay.
I like
So
it.
let's solve this one out together. So I'm gonna get 4x plus 3 is less than 18 minus x. What did I just use?
The distributive.
I distributive property, right? Are these inequalities equivalent? Yes, because I used the distributive property. Now, what I can do is subtract 4x, okay? Because 4x minus 4x is 0. I have now created an easier inequality to work with because I use the subtraction property of inequalities now, right? So we're dealing with inequalities, so it's a property of inequalities. Now what do I need to do?
Plus 18 on both sides.
Plus what?
18.
Okay, so plus 18, be careful. What is 3 plus 18? What's 18 plus 18?
Urban.
I mean,
Minus 18.
See, and that's why we can't make assumptions. Read it and be careful about it. I went with it, right? But if I add 18, that is not creating that 0 that I want.
Yeah.
I need to
Minus
subtract it, so we fix it. 18 minus 18 is, that's a good old 0. That becomes a negative 15 is less than negative 5x. So when I take it, so two things. One, is this 18 positive or negative? That's a positive, right? So in order to undo that, to make a 0, I'm going to subtract, right? The other thing is remember what we're trying to do is get closer to this being the only thing on its side of the inequality. So if I do 18 plus 18, I get a 36, I don't get a 0. I'm always trying to make zeros or what else? Ones. We good with that idea? Zeros or ones, and when adding and subtracting is a 0. Last step, divide by negative 5. Alright, and so, what's the left-hand side? Okay, then what comes next? Like keep this direction or make it go to the right greater than? So keep it the same. And then negative 5 divided by negative 5 is? Non-zero. 1, so 1 times x is x. Remember, that's what we want. And so DJ, I already saw you saying that we need to reverse the direction. That's what I'm talking about. Sometimes we need to reverse the direction. We're not always certain which. Okay? What number do I know needs to be on my number line? 3. Would that be an open point or a closed point? Can it equal?
Open.
So it's an open, right? It cannot equal that 3, so it's an open point. Right now, we want to recognize, is the x bigger than the 3 or less than the 3? That's bigger than 3, so I need to go this direction, right? Which means the number 4 should be a what to the inequality? Solution, meaning it makes the inequality true. Let's check it. 2 times 4 plus 1.5 is less than 18 minus 4. 2 times 4? 8. 8 plus 1.5 is 9.5. Less than 14. 2 times 9.5 is 19. Oh. Is that statement true?
Yeah.
19 is less than 14? That's a hard no. So should I be going to the right here?
No.
Was 4 a solution?
No.
No? 4 is not a solution, so should I be going to the right? No? I know we're tired. It's Friday. Alright, but it's actually going to the left.
How do you know this?
That's a great question. DJ, what told you to reverse the direction of the inequality? Do you know? Okay. So let's look at it this way. Can we all agree 8 is greater than 6? Yeah? So what about if I add 2? Is 10 greater than 8? That's a property of inequality. If I add to both sides of the inequality, I maintain the inequality. What about if I multiply by 3? Then I get 24 and 18. Is 24 greater than 18? Yes. Okay? That's a property of inequalities. Just have to do it to both sides. But what about if I divide by a negative 2? What's 8 divided by negative 2? Negative 4. 6 divided by negative 2 is? Is negative 4 greater than negative 3? So I need to reverse this to make that inequality true. What was different in that case?
You divided by a negative.
I divided by a negative. to multiply by a negative. What's 8 times negative 2?
-16.
Negative 16. Is greater than negative 12?
No.
No? It's less than? So what's different?
Adding a negative.
Okay, be careful about your language. Are we adding, multiplying, or
Divided.
dividing by a
Negative.
negative? If you multiply or divide by a negative, you have to reverse the direction of the inequality.
So when you reverse it, you can just like change it. Like you don't have to like.
Well, it's not that you just change it. We want to maintain equivalency, correct? So to make it stay equivalent, I have to reverse the direction of inequality. I know it sounds weird to think about it that way, but I have to reverse the direction of inequality when I multiply or divide by a negative. Do you think we might forget that at times, though? Do you want ways that we don't forget that? I do too, right? It's much easier to do it this way. Is Andre solving this as an inequality? No. He just took the inequality and he made it an equal sign, right? And he still got the 3, didn't he? Once you get the 3, what can you do to figure out which side are the solutions? Solutions make the inequality true. So we checked the 4. Was the 4 a solution? No. So was I going to the right? So I'm going to the left. Is that something you might be able to do every single time? Yes. Okay? I'm not even going to stress about Priya's. I want us to just focus on Andre for the sake of time. Notice that's exactly what Andre did though, right? Andre solved the inequality as an equation, got the point that we're going to either stop or start at, and then he tested a 4. Testing to see if x equals 4 is a solution. That's exactly what we did. That's not a solution. So he's not going to the right of 3, he's going to the left of 3. We good with that idea? Okay? And that's what I would do. Please make a note to yourself next to Andre of what he is actually doing, right? We see the steps, but what is he actually doing? He is solving the inequality as an equation. Then test around to test around that value to find solutions. This is why it's important to understand what a solution is. Okay? Solving the inequality as an equation and test around the value to find solutions. You don't have to reverse the direction with an equation because there's nothing to reverse. So instead of making our lives difficult and struggling when to remember to reverse the direction or not reverse the direction, just do it this way. The beauty of this strategy, it does not matter how high you go in mathematics, this strategy will always work with inequalities. When you get into calculus with derivatives and integrals and things like that you've never heard of and sound really scary, they're not. When you start dealing with rational functions and sinusoidals, sine and cosine functions, this strategy will always work. You solve it as an equation, then you test on the number line to see which sets make the inequality true. That's it. It will always work. And it's closer to the true meaning of the solution process. That being said, some practice time. So here are 4 inequalities. All right? Work with a partner to decide on at least 2 inequalities to solve one inequality using Andre's strategy, which that's the only one we're going to use. So here's what I'll say. Either do, sorry, I just realized, I'll rewrite up here if anyone needs that. Does anyone need me to rewrite that process? We all have it down? Okay. Either pick A or D, or pick A, and then pick A or C. Sorry, I should have clarified that. So, pick 1 from the 1s and 1 from the 2s. Okay? As a group, work through it and see what you get, right? So what are we going to do immediately here if we choose A?
1 divided by negative.
That's not the first step I'm gonna take.
Doable.
That's not the first step I'm gonna take. What did we just
Subtract.
write out about Andre's strategy?
Turn it
Make
into
it
a-
combination.
Turn it into an equation. I know that that seems unnecessary, and it really honestly is for something this simple. But it's gonna help you when you get to more complicated ones like B and C, or B and D. Trust me. It's also gonna help me on something like C, because what am I gonna have to deal with in C? A negative. And this is what happens. Students regularly forget, is it when I multiply or divide by a negative? Do I just do it all the time? Is it when I add and subtract by a negative? When is it that I reverse the direction? Take the guesswork out, solve it as an equation, and then test around it on the number line. Okay? Represent your solutions with a number line and with interval notation. Ready to get to work? And go. Work together, help each other grow and learn.
I'll start with the first step.